death sentence for 529 members of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, and they're only a fraction of Morsi supporters facing trial. A devastating day for the grieving families of Flight 370 as Malaysia's Prime Minister announces the plane likely ended deep inside the Indian Ocean. World leaders descend on The Hague for the G7 summit, but it's the East-West standoff over Crimea taking the stage.
The news today with Lucy Aharish.
Good evening. An Egyptian court convicted a group of 529 Muslim Brotherhood activists and sentenced them to death over the murder of police officers during last summer's riots. And another group consisting of 700 people is due to go on trial tomorrow. I-24 News reporter Uri Shapira looks at the situation in a divided Egypt.
Just cleaning house, or perhaps getting even with the Brotherhood's regime. Today, Egypt sentenced to death 529 Muslim Brotherhood members. The court in Minya issued its ruling after only 2 sessions.
The judge prevented us from entering by force and issued a decision without witness and sentenced 530 people to death. Is this justice? Justice is dead.
The defenders complained they did not have a chance to present their case. However, officials in the Egyptian court are convinced that justice was reached today. The group contains some senior Brotherhood members who were charged with murdering policemen and attacking police forces during riots last August. Clashes began after President Mohamed Morsi was ousted from office in July. Ever since, the new Egyptian government, led by Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, seems to have done its best to eliminate any trace of the old Brotherhood regime. According to Amnesty International, at least 1,400 people have been killed in Egypt since Morsi's ouster. Meanwhile, 2 other trials are in the spotlight in Egypt. Trial of 3 Al Jazeera journalists accused of assisting a terrorist group, and the ongoing trial of former President Mohamed Morsi, who faced charges on his involvement in killing protesters in 2012. Yesterday, the Cairo court decided to adjourn Morsi's trial until next month. As for the Al Jazeera case, the journalists remain in custody throughout the process, and they don't sound very optimistic.
We don't believe that the prosecution will be able to present any evidence to substantiate any of their charges.
When you chop wood, chips fly, say the old idiom. But some argue that chips are flying too easily in Egypt. The country is still waiting for the next elections, expected to take place next July, with El-Sisi expected to win overwhelmingly. But only time will tell if one of the strongest countries in the Middle East is moving towards a full democracy or towards another round of political instability and unrest.
And with me now is senior Middle East analyst Ali Waqid. Good evening.
Good evening, Lucy.
So let's try. The court in Egypt, I want to understand, the court in Egypt is controlled right now by the army?
It's fully controlled by the army, but even the most tough hardline of the regime didn't expect this decision of the court. The sources that I talked in the Egyptian Foreign Ministry said to me they were embarrassed with this decision of the court and of all the style of the trial. In 1 or 2 sessions, you cannot take life of less than 500 people. It is true that people had the right to appeal. It is true that the highest religious authority, the Mufti, is not expected to approve all the 528. And it is true also that only 150 were in jail, were arrested, and all the rest are in the run. But when I talk to the members of the Foreign Ministry, and especially to elements in the Egyptian civil society, they expressed their fear that this is some steps backwards, to the very ugly old regime that they wanted to forget.
This is basically a death sentence not only to people, but to the whole Muslim Brotherhood.
And this is why the most interesting reactions today were from the secular leftist opposition in Egypt that already called its masses to gather on April 6th to protest against one other decision, and it is forbidding the demonstrations in Egypt. And now this decision that come, and people were astonished by the fact that it was a mass trial, 528 people in a session of 2 hours sentenced to death, when the lawyers say that they didn't have any occasion to present their defense. Of course, the Muslim Brotherhood are not so excited by this decision. They know that it is more a political than a legal act. Their spokesperson said today that this is a message to the Muslim Brotherhood to stop their protest, and not a real intention to put these people to death. But this means that Egypt is going in further a chaos than it is now.
Yes, Ali Wakad, thank you very much for this. A probable tragic end to the Malaysian flight. The Malaysian Prime Minister announced this afternoon that new satellite analysis shows the plane flew into the Indian Ocean, and Malaysia Airlines assumes no one survived. I-24 News correspondent Shahal Peled has the details.
Lost beyond any reasonable doubt, Malaysia Airlines MH370 is now assumed to have crashed with no survivors.
With deep sadness and regret that I must inform you that according to this new data, flight MH370 ended in the southern Indian Ocean.
Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak announced the last known location of the plane was in remote Indian Ocean waters off the coast of Perth on Australia's west coast. The new details came from the UK's Air Accidents Investigation Branch. Prior to the short and somber statement, relatives of the missing 239 passengers and crew were informed that the satellite signals shed more light on the flight path, concluding its probable fatal end. Foreign editor of ABC, John Williams, described the grim scene in the Beijing hotel.
Screaming, crying coming from room in Beijing where MH370 families gathered. One woman fainted on hearing news.
As final hopes of the devastated family members were crushed, Prime Minister Razak asked the press to leave them in peace.
I urge the media to respect their privacy and allow them the space they need.
Earlier today, an Australian ship attempted to retrieve 2 objects spotted by a search aircraft in the ocean, about 2,500 kilometres southwest of Perth. It is not yet confirmed whether the objects, one green or grey and circular, the other orange and rectangular, were connected to the lost flight.
It's very difficult to get the next aircraft or the next ship onto the spot to take over, watching where the object is, because they're all at the end of their endurance and have to leave.
Malaysia Airlines also revealed today that co-pilot Farik Abdul Hamid was on his first Boeing 777 flight without a minder. However, nothing has yet emerged publicly to implicate him or the senior pilot of the flight. Further details will be announced tomorrow in a press conference. Meanwhile, for the first time in 16 days, grieving families got a somewhat definitive answer, yet it leaves so many questions still in the air.
And with me in the studio is Aaron Lapidot, aviation expert and deputy editor-in-chief of the daily newspaper Israel Hayom. Good evening, thank you very much for coming.
Good evening.
So is it the end?
Well, it's the end of part one that we can say today was more, be more definitive about it, because the Malaysian Prime Minister at least made some sort of a closure for the families, telling them, look, eventually the plane fell into the sea. There are no survivors, so you can mourn your dear ones and behave like, you know, they are dead already. The new information is not tangible
to understand
debris
exactly
or anything.
what happened.
Yeah, what they found is, what they did is analyze more thoroughly the data from the Inmarsat satellite, the one that found the ping that the Malaysian plane sent during its flight to this spot in the middle of the Indian Ocean. And they analyzed it more thoroughly, and they sort of discovered more data about the route of the flight. And I think this is a major step, because it places the plane somewhere. Okay, it is placed somewhere. It's not
exactly in this point. It places the plane somewhere, but can you really find something in this spot in the Indian Ocean?
That's chapter 2. It remains to be seen. That's what I can say. But I think that it is on the route that they predicted, projected by the data from the satellite. It's the southern arch. And it is like the end of its fuel capacity, so it looks like it flew the whole way to that direction and then just fell into the sea. Now remains the very big question: what brought him there? Why did it fall into the ocean? We don't know. There are two things that has to be found. One is the actual debris, and the second, some sort of psychological, behavioral,
and which occurred or didn't occur. But this
profile
this,
of
yes,
the,
of course, this I believe that we will probably find out maybe in the next few days. Maybe yes, maybe no. Thank you very much for this and for coming here.
It's a pleasure.
The G7 Nuclear Security Summit got underway in The Hague today. On the sideline, world leaders are discussing their responses to Russia's annexation of Crimea, and they've already decided that the G8 summit won't take place in Russia as planned. I-24 News correspondent Eli Ochenberg has the details.
World leaders, with one notable exception, Russian President Vladimir Putin, gathered in The Hague today for the latest summit in a series devoted to improving the security of nuclear stockpiles around the world. But the nuclear issue is overshadowed. In what has become the biggest confrontation between the East and West since the Cold War, the United States and the European Union have imposed sanctions targeting some of Putin's closest political and business allies, even considering the permanent expulsion of Russia from the wider G8 if it takes further actions to destabilize Ukraine. But it was unclear whether it's gone far enough to influence Moscow.
Europe and America are united in our support of the Ukrainian government and the Ukrainian people. We're united in imposing a cost on Russia for its actions so far.
Since the emergency meeting was announced last Tuesday, Putin has signed laws completing Russia's annexation of Crimea, and his troops have seized a Ukrainian airbase there. And while the world powers are contemplating how to punish Russia, the victory celebrations have begun.
Today is the first day of the fourth quarter in school. Children left for vacation as Ukrainian citizens, but returned to Russia. For us, it is, of course, a big gift, a big joy.
But it's not only joy. Interim Ukrainian President Alexander Turchinov ordered the withdrawal of armed forces from Crimea, citing Russian threats to the lives of military staff and their families. And until world powers decide if and how Russia will be disciplined, the peninsula of the Black Sea has already started a new era.
And joining me right now from Kiev is Oleg Rybachuk, former chief of staff to President Yushchenko. Good evening. Thank you very much for this phone call.
Good evening.
So, Mr. Rybachuk, what does Ukraine actually expect from the summit in The Hague?
Well, Ukraine now expects that there would be restoration of international law and order, because what happened before our eyes is an enormous challenge to long-practiced international regulation of relations. And first time after World War II, we have cynical, unprovoked invasion in front of the whole world. The whole world doesn't recognize it. One country says it's absolutely legitimate. So we have this challenge, and this challenge must be addressed. Otherwise, United Nations, NATO, EU, and international agreements are making no sense.
So when you're saying that basically there is a challenge and Ukraine should face this challenge, it doesn't mean that Ukraine will keep on fighting on Crimea's sovereignty?
Well, Ukraine has adopted a law which recognizes Crimea as a temporarily occupied territory. Therefore, with all corresponding obligations from Ukrainian government to provide assistance to Ukrainian citizens on that territory. Ukraine also is avoiding open provocation and bloodshed, which is every day or every night provoked from Russian troops.
Yes,
and we know that Russians are now trying to get rid of all Ukrainian military presence by March 25. Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Rybachuk, thank you very much for this. And with me now for a look inside Israel's I-24 News diplomatic correspondent Tal Shalet. Good evening, Tal.
Good evening, Lucy.
And today, the first foreign ministry strike in Israel's history, threatening to paralyze the whole diplomatic system. Before we discuss the matter, let's see your report.
The Israeli foreign ministry is shut down completely. All around the world, from the Jerusalem headquarters to 103 Israeli embassies and consulates abroad, all missions are closed for an indefinite period of time. Save the Foreign Ministry is the official slogan of 1,200 members of the Israeli Foreign Service who have been on strike since the beginning of March, protesting their salaries and working conditions. The starting salary is $1,500 to $1,700 a month. After 15 years of experience and a master's degree, the average salary rises to just $2,500.
Our salaries overseas have not been updated in 12 years, while the cost of living overseas has been going up and up.
It's a long-standing rift which has heated up over the past year. After 7-month-long talks, the workers' union blew up mediation efforts with the finance ministry earlier this month. At first, they stopped handling official visits, whether by Israeli officials overseas or by foreign officials to Israel, halted all consular services, and stopped engaging in public diplomacy. After 2 weeks of gradual sanctions, they called it quits, declaring a general strike at the beginning of the week. In between weekly demonstrations, employees launched a nasty social media battle. A special Twitter and Facebook account has been updating daily, and Israeli diplomats are frequently posting public comments.
We want to get back to doing what we do best, but there is no substitute for professionals, and that's us, and we deserve to be paid as professionals, and we deserve to be treated by the government of Israel as the professionals which we are.
The strike could have dramatic implications on Israel's diplomatic positions and security, and has already caused millions of dollars to go down the drain. But only now has it made the local headlines. The diplomats are hoping that the strike will change the picture.
Tal, this is outrageous.
Well, yes, this escalating labor dispute has already caused a lot of damage to ongoing Israeli foreign policy operations all around the world. For instance, the Israeli Prime Minister was forced to cancel his first visit to Latin America next month. The Israeli Defense Minister today canceled a visit to Rome next week. But the big question is surrounding the most anticipated visit of the upcoming year, and this is, of course, Pope Francis's visit to the Holy Land. It's scheduled to the end of May, but no preparations have started yet. So there's a big question, will it take place? And one of the problems of the foreign ministry workers is that they're not really getting anyone's attention. So we went to see if the Israeli public has any attention to it. Let's see what they had to say.
Let's see.
People definitely have to strike. I think it's one of the only ways that the government and higher people in the government actually listen to us and actually do intend to do something about it.
I think it's inappropriate. It's never a good time for the employees of the Foreign Affairs Office to start a strike. You can never know what might happen in the world.
I think a strike in itself is not a good method. It's a tool that doesn't really serve the strikers.
The Ministry of Defense keeps spending a lot. The Foreign Affairs deserves more than that. They truly work hard in harsh conditions. They have a very problematic minister. It just put $100,000 down the drain. The Foreign Affairs deserve much more.
What will happen to Pope Francis at the end?
Let's pray.
Let's pray. Tasha Lev, thank you very much for this. We're going out for a small break, 2 minutes break, and then we will be back. The news today, don't go anywhere. A death sentence for 529 members of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, and there are only a fraction of Morsi supporters facing trial. A devastating day for the grieving families of Flight 370 as Malaysia's Prime Minister announces the plane likely ended deep inside the Indian Ocean. And world leaders descend on The Hague for the G7 summit, but it's the East-West standoff over Crimea taking the stage. In a report this week, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon said 175,000 people remain besieged by Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's forces, while 45,000 people are trapped by opposition groups in several areas. On the Daily Question, we asked, 4 years into Syria's war, is there an end in sight? Joining me right now is I-24 News editor Nurit Zanger, like every night. Good evening. So, what are our
Well, let's
viewers
begin with the poll, which was not highly optimistic, as I must say. I think we expected. 86% said no, there is no likely end in sight. Just 9% said yes. Let's take a look, though, and get right to it, to the answers, because we had some good arguments on both sides, even for the yeses, which is hard to drum up, I think.
Yes.
A good answer for that. Let's start right away with Mason in New York, who says the UN has made clear talks aren't a priority. If the UN isn't concerned, I don't see any end in sight. I think he's referring to Lakhdar Brahimi, the UN Syria envoy, who just today said he doesn't expect any Syria talks coming soon. So he has a point. If the UN itself is saying, I don't think it's going to happen soon, why should anybody else?
And we just discussed the matter like a few days ago, and we had our analysts who are saying that it seems that Bashar al-Assad can announce his win in
Absolutely.
this
There's
conflict.
a lot, we'll get to it later too, a lot of talk that we heard from people about Putin's support of Syria. Putin just seems to be getting stronger and stronger, so that's definitely going to help Assad. Let's go to Robert, who answered from Cologne, Germany, who says, we see the same things with Iran, Syria, Egypt, and probably Crimea. There's a lot of shouting and noise about a conflict, and then the world moves on. Sad but true that, listen, even in news, as we know, something is sort of trendy, it's the focus, and then new conflicts come
it's
in
amazing.
and push it aside.
Every day we're talking about the crisis, and every day we are showing these footage from all over, from Syria, and what is happening there.
And often very difficult footage.
Yeah, it's very difficult footage, and to see the world just standing aside and not doing anything, it's just frustrating every single night, I have to say.
Absolutely.
But yes.
You can see the same for the Central African Republic. That's another daily question. We'll get to that
Definitely.
another day. Azuka in Nigeria said it's the fourth year already, then it's 6 more to go. I think that speaks for itself. And let's just get to Inusa, who answered us from Burkina Faso, who said, even if the international community dismisses Bashar, it's very probable that the situation will be worse than what we are seeing now. So he has a point that even if Bashar is kicked out, we'll get to this also, maybe we'll ask our analyst, who will rule Syria if Assad's not there?
Yes, and to maybe understand a little bit better, joining us to this conversation is Intelligence Affair correspondent Yossi Melman. Good evening.
Good evening, Lottie.
So, Yossi, let's speak in a realistically way of speaking. Can you really foresee an end to the Syrian war?
No, there is no end to the bloodshed. Unfortunately, this conflict will go on, and in parallel, the international interest, the public interest in the conflict is sinking deeper and deeper into, and the crisis is probably going to disappear into oblivion. Unfortunately, the international community cannot pull itself together to end the conflict because of a lot of reasons, and above all, the renewed Cold War between the United States and Russia, and Syria is going to be one more of many conflicts around the globe.
You know, we are seeing that the world is standing aside, and maybe one of the biggest questions is how come the world and the international community is standing aside? So I will ask you this big question, how come?
Well, because the superpowers, the United States and Russia, cannot agree upon a accepted formula for a solution. And I think the turning point was the decision to dismantle President Assad regimes of its chemical weapons. However, instead of the promise made by U.S. President Barack Obama to that if Assad crosses the red line, then United States would flex its muscles.
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of big questions, no big answers. Yossi Melman, thank you very much for this.
Thank you.
Well, we heard a lot of no's in the poll. We heard a lot of no's from Yossi. Let's try to be a little bit more optimistic. Slightly more optimistic. Everything is relative. Danielle in Manchester says, if the opposition can be convinced to unite, then peace talks do have a chance. This is the semi-optimistic, because it's true one of the big problems in the talks was the opposition being so fragmented. If perhaps the international community can push, if somebody can push the opposition to at least be represented on one side.
And we are always asking, we always ask even here, who is the opposition? Is the opposition better for the Syrians than the Assad regime?
And who wants to represent them? And they don't seem to be clear on that. Slightly more optimistic, Jonathan in Birmingham, Alabama, there could be a chance to end the Syrian conflict if the U.S. took a firm stance against Bashar al-Assad. We saw Obama was very close to this and backed down. The way it's looking now doesn't seem in the foreseeable future. And Patrice in the Democratic Republic of Congo answered us in French, kind of echoing the same thing we heard from our French viewers. C'est possible si Assad accepte de céder le pouvoir. If Assad gives up power, then it's possible. But again, our other viewer brought up this point. If Assad's not there, who will be in power?
This, I have to say, is too optimistic.
Yes. Well, I said relative.
Yeah.
And let's just go to one more. Peter, who says, with less and less involvement of the international community, Assad is free to take control, which is more likely to end the war. So he comes from a completely different perspective. If Assad is left alone to fight the jihadists and terrorists, as he calls them, then that might be perhaps the actual end of the
real
war.
question is, who is the terrorist and who is not the terrorist?
That's the question frequently in the Middle East.
Yes.
I think in every situation we discuss here, there's always that issue.
Yes, definitely. Noit Zanger, thank you very much. Tomorrow you will be here with another question. More answers, of course. And we're going out for a small break, 2 minutes break, and then we will be back. The news today. Don't go anywhere. Sports, culture. We have it all here on the news today. A death sentence for 529 members of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, and they are only a fraction of Morsi supporters facing trial. A devastating day for the grieving families of Flight 370 as Malaysia Prime Minister announces the plane likely ended deep inside the Indian Ocean. World leaders descend on The Hague for the G7 summit, but it's the East-West standoff over Crimea taking the stage. Welcome back. Closing arguments have been reached in New York in the trial of the highest-ranking Al-Qaeda official to ever face trial in the United States. Suleiman Abu-Ghait, the chief spokesperson for Al-Qaeda, took the stand during his trial in his own defense and recounted his meetings with Osama bin Laden as well as lectures he gave in training camps. The 48-year-old is accused of providing material support to Al-Qaeda and conspiring with the group to kill Americans. He has pleaded not guilty to the charges. And joining me right now from New York is investigative journalist Martin Hamel. Good evening.
Good evening.
So, Mr. Hamel, what were the biggest revelations from the trial?
I think the biggest revelation is really his encounters with Osama bin Laden himself. On the just after the 9/11 attacks, he recounts how bin Laden described to him that he was responsible for those attacks, and he asked Suleiman Abu-Ghait what he thinks would be the reaction from the United States to the attacks. And according to him, he said that he believed that the United States would not rest until they would kill bin Laden and destroy the Taliban leadership. And according to him as well, bin Laden said that he was taken aback by it, and he thought that he was pessimistic. He thought his view was too pessimistic, that the United States would never go that far.
So, Mr. Hamel, are we supposed to see any more alleged terrorists in the American court?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question again?
Are we supposed to see, like in the near future, more alleged terrorists in the American court?
Well, I think we'll be seeing more of him as well. By the way, another important thing that he had to say is that in his trial was that his meeting with the architect, that the architect of the 9/11 attacks, who's in prison there, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, he basically was going to testify on his behalf and say that he was not involved at all in the 9/11 attacks or in any violence. But the American court would not let him testify. He's in Guantanamo Bay, and they would not let him testify. And Sheikh Mohammed was prepared to back the claim that he has not been involved in any violence. So at this stage, we're in closing arguments, and I don't think we're going to see any more testimony. It will now be in the hands of the court to decide.
Martin Hamel, thank you very much for this. The Israeli Attorney General has announced he is investigating complaints that Energy and Water Minister Silvan Shalom allegedly committed sexual offenses 15 years ago against a woman he worked with. I-24 News diplomatic correspondent has more.
The Israeli political system is quite vibrant, but not every day does a real-time scandal erupt, and one with wide implications. Today, the Attorney General launched a probe investigating complaints that Energy and Water Minister Silvan Shalom allegedly committed sexual offenses 15 years ago. A former secretary who served under Shalom when he was science minister in the first Netanyahu government claimed she was sexually assaulted by Shalom, one of the most veteran and respected political figures in the country. At this point, the investigation is just preliminary and complicated since the statutes of limitations for criminal prosecution has passed. But police are treating it seriously in case other alleged victims may come forward. Shalom hasn't responded yet, but his confidants are fiercely denying the allegations, saying that he doesn't even know the woman in question. In the background floats the upcoming Israeli presidency race to replace President Shimon Peres in July. Shalom hasn't announced his candidacy yet, but he is considered a front-runner for the job. Those close to him imply this is simply a political assassination aimed at disrupting his candidacy.
Controversial trade deal between mainland China and Taiwan has sparked protests now in their 7th day. The demonstrators say the agreement will threaten small businesses and allow Beijing to exert greater influence in Taiwan. I-24 News economy reporter Daniel Roth has the story.
More than 200 people have been occupying Taiwan's legislature since last Tuesday, with thousands more protesting outside in solidarity. The demonstrations erupted in response to a free trade agreement with China, which protesters say undermines the country's economy and makes it vulnerable to political pressure from Beijing. The swelling crowds of the student-led coalition are demanding that the agreement be withdrawn after not following through on a promised review of the controversial pact. So far, the demands of what the Taiwanese media has dubbed the Sunflower Revolution have not been met.
Everyone will have to stay here, but please do not let our passion be taken down by the delaying tactics of Kuomintang.
The treaty with China, Taiwan's primary trading partner, passed its first hurdle, getting the okay by a parliamentary committee, which provides for the opening of the services sector to Chinese companies. In exchange, Taiwanese investors can now access a large part of the Chinese market. For the president of Taiwan, this agreement has the potential to allow the country to gain credibility on an international level and lead to new alliances that could be beneficial to their economy.
The approval of Taiwan's trade pact will open Taiwan's market to mainland China further and allow our country to have more advantageous conditions compared to other foreign countries' investment. Young people have big dreams. We should not restrict them in Taiwan. We should support them to go into a bigger market.
While entrance into a bigger market could happen, this agreement could also lead to an influx of Chinese workers into the Taiwanese job market, which could displace Taiwan's workers.
And for a closer look, with me now in the studio is I-24 News Economy Magazine reporter, correspondent is Danielle Roth. Good evening.
How's it going?
So, Danielle, Taiwanese economy, how does it look right now?
It looks very good, actually. So certainly compared to China, their GDP per capita is 5 times greater than China's, and people living under the poverty line, many fewer. All across the board, everywhere you look, from press freedom to average income, everything is looking brighter in Taiwan.
So if everything is looking brighter in Taiwan, so there is what the president is saying, and there is what the protesters are saying. What is the difference?
Well, so the president is hoping to connect further with China. On one hand, it's a greater market. It's a 1.2 billion people. On the other hand, this president is particularly friendly to China, which is worrisome for a lot of the protesters. They are worried politically that this is going to put Taiwan under China's wing. Now, of course, China sees Taiwan as under its wing anyways.
Yes.
This also may be a precondition for joining the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is, 12-country free trade agreement led by the U.S., which may actually be the bigger reason that the president is looking for that.
So what should we expect next?
So the protesters are actually just asking for a review. At the end of the day, they've occupied the legislature because the review that they were promised was never done. And so, hundreds of people are being beaten up by cops because they entered the legislature because they were asking for a review. So can the government accomplish this? Certainly. Will they? It's a bigger question. A lot of analysts say that to avoid embarrassment, the president is going to go even harder on these protesters.
So it doesn't look so bright like he started.
And he certainly won't be avoiding embarrassment.
Yes. Danielle Roth, thank you very much for this. Is the far right gaining significant ground in France? If Sunday's local elections are to be believed, it's very likely the case. I-24 News reporter Leslie Rezouk explains.
A spectacular breakthrough for the National Front after the first round of French municipal elections. Steve Briouat, one of the National Front candidates, won the election in Hénin-Beaumont on the first round. And for the first time since 1995, National Front candidates will also be present in the second round in more than 100 communities. The party got results beyond expectations in many southern cities, outrunning the Socialist Party in Marseille. In Perpignan, Avignon, or Béziers, the National Front is leading the first round. And according to political analysts, it's become a third political power.
We have two main ways to explain this. The first one is the disappointment, the disenchantment from the left wing, which led to demobilization within the left wing itself. The second matter is the recent affairs of the last few weeks, which benefited the National Front. The National Front's progression on these levels can be explained, besides the economic situation, by the context of these affairs.
An unfavorable context which can partly explain the record rate of abstention of 37%. In any case, Marine Le Pen's efforts at reversing the demonization of the party seem to be bearing fruit.
The essential meaning of this great success for our movement is that the vote for the National Front and Bleu Marine is not only a national force. From now on, it's a great local force. It's a vote designed to take root in territories throughout the Republic in order to prepare tomorrow's alternative.
L'alternative de demain. But this breakthrough does need to be put into perspective. The National Front didn't hit 10% support in many larger cities, including Bordeaux and Rennes, and scored just 6% in Paris.
Cannabis is still illegal in Israel, but its use for medical reasons is becoming increasingly widespread. A look inside the industry in Israel.
It's D-Day for Yaron. He finally got permission from the Israeli Ministry of Health to use medical cannabis after years of traditional treatments. But before picking up his new alternative drug from a specialized pharmacy, Yaron is going to a unique clinic specializing in medical cannabis to become more familiar with this particular treatment.
I had a few hand surgeries, but it kept hurting. I've been prescribed all kinds of medication to ease the pain, but the pain remained, not to mention the side effects of all those drugs. It made me even sicker than I was before. And one day, someone made me smoke a joint because it was feeling sorry for me, and it was the first time anything had worked. My pain was relieved, and it felt good.
Welcome to the Tikkun Olam Clinic. In Hebrew, Tikkun Olam means healing the world. Here, thousands of patients like Moshe are taken care of.
We started our activities in 2005 with the first legal license to grow and provide medical cannabis for patients with a license. We have patients, sadly, from 6 months old to 102 or 3, I think she is.
From the production to the distribution stage, including the training, this nonprofit allowed thousands of patients to receive a medical treatment based on cannabis consumption. It's time for Yaron to pick up his first grams of cannabis, and he's quite optimistic. He hopes his pain will be elevated thanks to the subtle effects of the ancestral plant.
All my patients ask me what's best. My answer is that it depends on them and their reaction to the substance. Every patient gets an adapted treatment. What seems to fit most of our patients best is a strain of cannabis called Erez, 23% THC. In a way, that's our prototype.
Sadly, the government and the Ministry of Health have promised to widen the possibilities to receive medical cannabis and to give licenses. This hasn't happened.
While cannabis is establishing itself as an increasingly legitimate and indispensable medicine, it seems the Israeli government, under the pressure of pharmaceutical companies, isn't looking to develop this alternative solution.
Yes, and tonight on Inside Magazine, a focus on the Dead Sea, one of the most unique places on Earth and at risk of disappearing. And now the World Bank has signed an agreement for the creation of a canal between the Dead Sea and the Red Sea, a project highly contested by the ecologist militants. Here's a preview.
This is a special cruise. 5 times a year, a team of scientists from Haifa University set off with their instruments on the only boat that sails on the Dead Sea. Tal is an oceanology student and also a crane operator where necessary. Why don't you use the jetty up there?
I had 1 or 2 cruises which we still used it. Afterwards, the sea, went away too much. It went backwards too much, so this is already not relevant.
We are in the Middle East, at the lowest point on Earth, in a basin situated between the Judean Desert and the Moab Mountains, which rise to 1,300 meters. In the course of 50 years, the Dead Sea has lost a third of its surface, and its level continues to recede at a rate of 1 meter per year. At stake is the mining of white gold, carnallite, as well as the agriculture and population growth of the entire region. In extreme conditions, scientists are trying to understand this phenomenon.
How to stop the cry of the Dead Sea and maintain this resource for generation and generation ahead.
If nothing is done, in 50 years' time, the Dead Sea will be nothing more than an arid desert.
And with me now is our football analyst, Yoav Borowitz. Today we have to speak about the big Super Classico, huge Classico that was last night.
Tremendous.
Amazing,
Yeah.
I have to say. Yes, everybody talked about this game today.
It's one of the rare moments that sports really really moves you. It was like just beautiful art. It was
You know, I heard today a phrase that people told me, it's copy-paste game. Just keep it.
Just keep it perfect, exactly. And you know, first of all, we're talking about winners. First of all, football fans around the world, we're talking billions, hundreds of millions. They're all winners just to experience that. But after that, let's talk about Barcelona, who went to Madrid. Not many people expected they will win there. They were behind, trailing 2-1, and then 2-2, and then 3-2 was just amazing, and to win that game 4-3 was just unbelievable. Another huge winner, Leo Messi, the best footballer in the world. Some will claim the best footballer ever. 3 goals. We had Neymar, the Brazilian, with causing 2 goals. We had Iniesta, the lovely Iniesta, you know, scoring the first goal, tremendous, and then getting the penalty and the last goal. Just so much drama, and it was just a perfect game.
What happened to Ronaldo?
Ronaldo didn't show up. You know, we're talking about the footballer of the year, the guy who's just like, you know, a world beater. Like, he does everything, even better than Messi in many games. That's why he got the Ballon d'Or, the best player of the year, after 4 years that Leo Messi won it.
He did a big campaign for that.
He did, but still, he deserved it. But he came to the big game. He scored 1 goal, unjust, you know, penalty, but he didn't show up. He wasn't good enough. While he sees in his home, you know, in the Santiago Bernabeu, Leo Messi scores 3 goals, and we just have this drama that will pull over. You know, now Barca is trailing by 1 point only after Real Madrid and after Atletico Madrid. So we have a 3-horse race there in Spain. The whole world is looking, not just Spain. And, you know, we have the World Cup in a few months.
So the season is, let's say, it's not over.
It's not over,
right?
yeah, no, it's going to we have a few more games. And as I said, we have this crazy, crazy drama, you know, and we're talking history here. Everyone who saw the game yesterday people knew that they're watching history because we watched so many Clasico. We watched some great games, but nothing like compares to yesterday's. And the footballer who will win the trophy. And you know, and at the end of the day, it's a story between people. You know, it's who's better, Ronaldo or Messi. Because when Messi is better, Barcelona will win. Vice versa.
You know how I knew it was a good game? Because when the game was live, I heard my neighbors yelling.
Yeah.
And after a few hours, they saw the repeat, and then they yelled again.
Just to show you the power of football, you know, it's such a shared passion. If we could utilize it to other things, you know, people here, even in the Middle East, you know, Arabs love the game, Jews love the game. Just utilize that beautiful game to come together because the whole world watched it.
It was a great game. Yoav Borowitz, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You can run, but you cannot hide from technology. Cell phones have now become a hit in Bhutan, a remote Himalayan kingdom known as the last Shangri-La. More in the next report.
Buddhist monks, monasteries, and smartphones. The Himalayan kingdom of Bhutan was the last country in the world to get television. That happened in 1999, but now the country is making up for lost time as it embraces technology to reach beyond the surrounding mountains.
We can make many friends from outside also, and just to communicate with them. Plus, we have our cousins in outside countries, like Nepal, and we can easily chat with them. But if we don't have internet facilities like Facebook, then we cannot communicate with them.
Bhutan is famed for its gross national happiness development model. that takes into account criteria like nature and cultural conservation. But the country's prime minister says technology can help development.
There's a boom because why? The technology is not disruptive. It is good, and it can contribute to prosperity for Bhutan.
The change of lifestyle has coincided with a dramatic change to the political system. In 2005, the country's king ceded absolute power, and 2 democratic elections have since followed. Observers say the internet is already playing a crucial role.
80,000 Facebook users and increasing every day. That gives you an idea of how popular internet has become in such a short time. And a lot of, not only for meeting people, but it's being used like in other countries to create awareness, to campaign on certain issues, to influence the government.
About 3/4 of Bhutan's population of 750,000 now own a mobile telephone. A giant step for the land of the thunder dragon as it moves directly from feudalism to the modern age.
And joining me to take a look at the culture today is I-24 News culture correspondent Jaffa Port.
Good evening, Lucy.
So, science fiction film, new one?
Yes, a
Really?
new science fiction film, but it's a very interesting one. It's called Snowpiercer. It's where East meets West. It's a co-production between South Korea and Hollywood, directed by renowned Korean director Bong Joon-ho, and co-written with an American screenwriter. Now, this is a very international production. It's a debut for the English language for the director Bong Joon-ho, but it's based on a French graphic novel, ironically from 1984, because this is a very allegorical film, and it has also a very international cast, British, American, Scandinavian, and Korean. So it calls for the international audiences.
So it comes with a message.
Yes, absolutely. What is it about? It's a futuristic film. In 2031, an experiment goes wrong, trying to prevent global warming. It makes an eternal ice age on Earth, and all humanity is extinct, besides those on the survivors on a train, an enormous train which circles the Earth, but it is separated into the elites in the front of the train and the poor in the tail of the train until they decide to revolt.
Sounds familiar.
It does sound familiar. It's a sort of, I think, a trend of blockbuster action films that we've seen recently, looking more and more into the current social affairs that we have. The entire world is going through this social revolution, social transformation, and it is translated into films. We've seen in recent years the Hunger Games series, for example, once again dealing with the gaps between the poor and the rich, also criticizing reality shows. And this year in the Hunger Games Mockingjay, we will see in part 3 the revolution of the crowds against the elite, those in power, against the corruption, against the cost of living. And we also had in 2013 Elysium with Matt Damon. Also, once again, the poor against the rich and the revolution that is here to come. But what I thought was most fascinating about Snowpiercer was the feeling that you have when you board a plane. You're in the economy section, but you go through business class and first class, and you go sit by the lavatory in the end of the plane. So it makes you think maybe you should have a social revolution on the plane.
I just love it when Hollywood is trying to teach us a lesson.
Absolutely.
It's worth
a while, and it's worth to watch.
Yes. Jaffa Port, thank you very, very much for this. We're going out for a small break, 4 minutes break, and then we will be back for the I-24 News Daily Debate. Don't go anywhere. The news today, I'll be back. A big debate. Don't go.